It was hard to make Mr. Rogers mad. His composure, his cool, was ever present, honest, part of his DNA, and it calmed the world around him. He was so nice to everyone all the time that there are literally hundreds of stories online about his saint-like deeds. Which is why it's strange that what made Mr. Rogers really angry were pies in the face. I don't mean it as hyperbole either. Mr. Rogers wasn't talking about verbal or political pies in the face. Making someone look foolish on camera. I mean literal TV clowns throwing pies at each other. One of the gentlest, goofiest forms of slapstick comedy made Mr. Rogers furious. During an interview with Amy Hollingsworth, author of The Simple Faith of Mr. Rogers, the nicest man on earth said, quote, "I got into television because I saw people throwing pies at each other's faces. And that to me was such demeaning behavior. And if there's anything that bothers me, it's one person demeaning another. That really makes me mad." The man who dominated children's television for 33 years hated television. And he hated how it portrayed people demeaning each other. He thought TV was loud, crude, and frantic. Which is ironic, because Mr. Rogers won 3 Daytime Emmys, awards for television, and he won the Television Critics Association Lifetime Award, an award that's usually given to big, loud personalities like Lucille Ball and Johnny Carson. When Mr. Rogers won, he stood for his acceptance speech and asked for 10 seconds. 10 seconds of complete, uninterrupted silence from a crowd of daytime TV stars and producers whose job it is to be loud for a living. He wanted 10 seconds of quiet consideration from everyone. For all the people who have cared for us in our life and loved us into being. You can see him on YouTube pulling up his sleeve to look at his wristwatch. He says, "I'll watch the time in complete earnestness and utter confidence." You can hear the crowd chuckle at first, but the chuckles died down, and Mr. Roger got his 10 seconds. For 10 seconds, he brought television as a whole to a hushed, respectful silence. Because Mr. Roger was nice through and through, and sometimes nice guys finish first. You're listening to The Re-Engineered You. This is a podcast about self-empowerment and all the myths, lies, and misconceptions we tell ourselves. Then we use science and history to bust those myths and re-engineer a better you. I'm your host, Todd Laments, the extrovert.
And I'm the writer, researcher, and introvert, Joe Anthony, whose job it is to dig through the outer layer of no duh on the internet and get us to the juicy facts. So when we start our show today, Todd, I'm going to ask you, have you heard of the nice guy trope, or the idea of nice guys faking it?
No.
Okay, so for today, when we talk about being nice, we don't mean guys, like the quote-unquote nice guy, guys who pretend to be nice so that they can try to get a date or get laid, holding the door open for women or buying them stuff and acting surprised or aggressive when they don't reciprocate.
We're talking about genuine, sincerity shows people.
Right. So, Todd, I have a personal question for you. Why are you so nice all the time?
I'm going to throw that back at you, because I think if there was an award ceremony, I might get an honorable mention, but I think you'd probably win. Why are you so... And I'll tell you about Joe. I've been friends with Joe for a long time, and he's the most patient, non-judging human being I've ever met.
I think that is a side effect of me being flawed and realizing that other people are going to need time and patience. But that's our big point today is we are saying nice as in genuine and altruistic. When we use the word nice in the show, that is actually what we're referencing. We are not referencing the nice guy trope or being nice to get a reward of some sort.
And we're talking less about just saying nice things, but doing nice things.
Right. So our myths today are all about, do nice guys actually finish first?
So those are the myths we're going to explore today. 3 myths about being Mr. Nice Guy. 3 myths that all basically ask the same question. Does it really pay to be nice? Myth 1. Nice people get treated as doormats, right? So how the heck has being nice, or niceness in general, stuck around in our species? If aggressive people are seen as more attractive, shouldn't the world be populated by Biff the Bully from Back to the Future? Myth 2. Speaking of our attraction to dominant people, how unattractive is niceness? Is it unattractive? Can being nice in earnest help score you a date? Myth 3. The ultimate expression of niceness, altruism, means giving away your time and money, which can't be good for your bank account. So we'll ask the big question. Do nice people make more money in the end? But first, I want to share a story about how unbelievably, impossibly, incurably nice Mr. Roger was when the cameras weren't rolling.
So generally speaking, for podcast purposes, there are a lot of nice people we could have chosen from. So why Mr. Rogers?
Well, for starters, I was a fan of the show.
Oh, really?
Yeah. My mom, to tell you about my mom's a school teacher. She adores kids. She's taught Sunday school for 43 years. And she made this comment about this show when I told her we're going to do this. She said, "You loved that show as a boy. You were this wild-eyed ADHD kid, but as soon as Mr. Rogers came on every day, you sat quietly and watched it." And then she said this, Joe, she goes, "And the show was just so dull."
It kind of tickles me that a teacher said that.
Exactly. And, back in the day, back in the late 70s, early 80s, that's when he was in his heyday.
Right.
I mean, his heyday was long, and I only got so much television time. I don't know about with your parents. You only watch so much television. So this was so good that it took a good chunk of my television time.
So you're willing to sacrifice all that sitcom time for some Mr. Rogers.
Fred Rogers, my man.
Awesome. So do you remember the characters from the show?
I don't now, but
okay.
I'm pretty mild out, as you can tell by looking at me. Lots of drinks and drugs later. Here we are.
Right. Yeah, you stray from Mr. Rogers eventually. So I got to ask, pertaining to our show, did you ever mail him? Did you ever write him a letter?
Oh, God, I wish I would have. Okay. Now, Mr. Rogers gave everything he had to strangers. He was very, very generous in lots of ways. But the thing he was most generous with, Joe, was his time. Now, he used to get fan mail from all over the world. And he had about 13 million kids watching his show. So number 1 and 2 are for getting fan mail from kids?
What's that?
Santa Claus and Mr. Rogers.
Right.
Now the difference is Mr. Rogers wrote all of his fans back.
Yeah, that'd be so weird. It's like if Santa actually replied, which is awesome.
So he didn't have a lot of time for this. Okay, he was a father. He had a hit TV show. He was doing promotional things, but he'd always sit down and write a pen a letter, not from his entourage or not from the studio, Miss PBS. They don't do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He'd write hand letters to each of the kid, making them feel special.
Wow.
Now, when I was doing the research for this show, and you ever get into those things, and Joe, those things where people start arguing online about things?
Yeah, I'm one of those people arguing. So,
well, they infuriate me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm reading this one, and this is what it was about. It's about Mr. Rogers writing letters back to kids. And the huge argument was, and it goes on for lines, strands, pages, and different websites. A lot of people said he had impeccable handwriting. And then the other people complained that it wasn't that great. So people went on and on about this.
So that's the biggest scandal we could find with Mr. Rogers. Was his penmanship really that good?
Now, I want to point out an obvious thing, and I read through way too many of these. What no one brought up or failed to mention was these were handwritten. These weren't emails like nowadays.
Right.
So how many TV stars today would handwrite anything to anyone?
Yeah, if anyone's wondering how long that takes, instead of using autocorrect on your phone or a typewriter, just write a single letter and try not to go mad.
But I still think somewhere, there's probably 10,000, maybe 5,000. There's adults, male and women, all over this country and all over the world who have their most prized possession is a signed letter from Mr. Rogers.
I think that's really cool. Like as far as possessions you can have sort of hung and framed, I would love to have a Mr. Rogers letter. So his niceness, we're gonna sort of separate him into his own bucket, because I don't. We already mentioned the nice guy trope, but when we talk about nice, the trouble with defining the term is that it oftentimes gets put into a constellation of terms that conscientiousness, warmth, and respect, those generally contribute to being nice. But we kind of associate nice as a culture, like America, when you say, "Oh, I'm being walked on because I'm the nice guy." The reason that can be is because you're actually looking at somebody who is being needy or weak or predictable or boring or inexperienced, and we kind of lump that in with niceness as a negative.
A pushover.
Right. So I was going to ask you, Todd, how many times have you fallen into each category of nice? Like usually when you are nice, where do you stray? Do you stray more toward being altruistic and generous and patient? Or do you stray toward being sort of predictable and boring? Like, which one do you sort of fall onto?
I would say the warm and consistent.
Okay.
I think those are probably my stronger things.
Right.
Patience is not my strong suit. That's why I say that.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm ultra patient with some people, but very few. Most I'm very little patient. What about you?
I fall into the patient category, but dang it if I don't feel like I'm being walked on sometimes. So a lot of our listeners are going to relate to that. There's actually a very popular book for millennial self-help, which is called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And the idea is that being nice gets you walked on, and it's sort of something we've all adopted as necessary.
Where's the line? When do you have to stand up for yourself a little bit?
Right, exactly. So for this episode, we are specifically talking about did humans evolve to be nice? And not doormat nice, but patient, altruistic, helpful to each other, that kind of nice. So generally speaking, Todd, do you believe that people are nice naturally?
I think they work at it. I think some people are more inclined in it if they have like the super sweet parents and were loved and didn't have a tough upbringing.
Okay.
What do you think?
I, being a cynic, sort of, I thought before going into this article that we weren't sort of geared for that. I figured that nice was a fluke, and it only happened if you were raised right.
It's like something you picked up along the way to
Right.
charm your way through life.
Exactly, yeah. Like anyone who's nice has figured it out, and the people that are mean, they just haven't figured it out yet. But after reading these articles, I've started to sort of drift into maybe thinking we're kind of built to be nice. Certainly Mr. Rogers would have had me believe that. And that's weirdly the message I think we're going to end up with today. So we've talked about this before in earlier podcast episodes. There's something called Williams-Buren syndrome, where on rare occasion, it's sort of a disorder. Somebody can be born with facial features that are quote unquote elf-like, like they have they look friendlier. But the idea is domestication in any species shortens cartilage and makes faces look softer, like a dog compared to a wolf. A dog has nice floppy ears and shorter legs, and its cartilage is a little bit shorter. Its teeth aren't as long, and it has, these big puppy eyes. The notion that we can take a wolf and eventually breed it to be gentler and to growl less at humans and bark less.
Kitten cute, right? You have it on the house.
Right. So if you think of humans and you think of, are we born to be nice? Are we supposed to be getting along? Are jerks the norm, or are we domesticated? We actually are domesticated. If you look at our earlier ancestors, if you look at early man or Neanderthal or any version of that, that's the wolf version of us, basically.
We always talk about that because we're both history geeks. About people say how tough it is nowadays. We're like, oh no,
right? Yeah.
If you knew anything about history, it was way worse in the old days.
Totally,
brutality was every day.
Right. So just on the human timeline, generally speaking, we are domesticated. We are built to be nice to some degree. Another good indicator of this is. If you put enough chimps or chimpanzees in a airplane and fly them somewhere, it's not going to land with an airplane full of chimps. It's going to land with an airplane full of bodies and like one chimp. You can put a bunch of humans into a concert. Like you can put 10,000 of us together and we're pretty much perfectly fine. So if you ever wonder, are we born to be nice? And, is self-domestication theory, does it hold water? It really kind of does. It makes a lot of sense.
It's kind of like being in quarantine with your family or roommates.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know if any other species could survive this virus as well as we are. We can
socially.
Just sort of, we can lock ourselves away with each other and we're fine. So for the record, our podcast is siding on the idea that we are, as a species, self-domesticated. Part of that, too, is our mate selection, our choices. Throughout our human history, we have usually gravitated toward mates that are more social and sociably conscious. Because, honestly, that our previous episodes have borne out that kind of makes you more money in life.
And our resources have made us more comfortable.
Right, exactly. The better you are at gaining resources, generally, the better you are socially. So it wouldn't make sense for everybody to be a wolf. It makes more sense for us to be puppy dogs and sort of all get along with each other.
Okay, even I spent 4 or 5 years of my day with Mr. Rogers in my house, sitting in front of him, listening to him, doing this research. There's something that I don't think I've even shared this with you. When I meet somebody, there's something I look for in them, and they have to have 2 really core values. I really respect and look up to and want to be around people who have a health goal and a spiritual goal. Okay. And I don't care what they are. They just have to have some compass for both. And Mr. Rogers hit this nail on the head. So part 1 is health. Mm-hmm. Mr. Roger was heavy, overweight as a boy. And I'm sure that made him a little more sensitive towards kids who were bullied and this and that. I haven't read that anywhere. It's just what I think. He outgrew it. He got healthy. Now, Mr. Rogers was 143 pounds his whole life.
Wow.
From 20 to 75. Now, keep in mind, he was 6 feet tall, Joe. Okay? He was a vegetarian before it was cool. He had a very low-calorie, dull, sweater-wearing diet where he ate the same things at the same time every day, just like he did on the show, this routine. Okay. He was busy every day. Again, he was a TV star for 33 years, but every day he took a nap, Joe.
Awesome. I love that phrase, the sweater-wearing diet. That kind of encompasses so much.
So not only did he take a nap every day, we all know how important good sleep. But by the way, Joe hasn't slept in about 12 years. That's why
you can tell. I look like it.
So forget naps. He just doesn't sleep at all. So he's an obsessive writer. That's another problem. So Mr. Rogers, when he got up every morning, would weigh himself. And of course, he probably knows what he weighs. He weighs 143 pounds.
Right.
He would smile and giggle and say, "I love you," to himself every day as a positive affirmation.
Wow.
He would swim for an hour and a half every single day. And he did that right before he went to work. So he realized that to be his best self, to be his nicest self, his healthiest self, he had to be physically fit.
That's awesome. And it sounds to me, too, that he's reducing his stress, his cortisol level by doing this as well.
That to me is a man. And let's keep in mind, he had his same show, the same job for 33 years. This is a man of discipline. Now, the second part is had a spiritual goal. He was trained to be a Presbyterian pastor, but he understood the difference between being a believer and religion. He grew up in the church, but he never talked about that. And what's funny, I grew up in the Presbyterian church with my mom. Mm-hmm. None of them ever said Mr. Rogers is one of our guys.
Wow. So it was he just quietly had this faith.
He did. And he didn't tell people he was a Christian. He showed them.
So, Todd, I kind of want to get a little bit into the practicality of being nice. A lot of people out there believe that being nice makes you undateable, or that it makes you at least seem less attractive when you first meet people.
I get that. It's like those 80s movies where the girl always goes with the jock.
Exactly.
And the sweet, nice kid, the goofy kid, the nerd's always trying to win her over with his wits.
Right. So I want to ask you, since you were recently married, when you first met your wife, how nice were you?
Oh, if it was just an act, I put on a little play for her.
or just were you your natural nice self, or did you hide that in the closet for a minute?
My sweet wife, when she first met me, we met at a public speaking class, and she did not like me. She thought I was loud and obnoxious. And so I asked her why she, finally ended up being interested in me. And she said how she saw me treat other people. There was sometime at the Toastmasters class wherein kids would come in, and she noticed how I included them and would give them attention and make a big deal. And then she noticed when we went out to eat how I treated everybody, the servers. She noticed how I acted around.
That's awesome. So when we differentiate between being the nice guy, quote unquote, and genuine niceness, that's a really good example. So here's kind of the most painful sticking part we're going to have as far as like data on our show is, are you dateable if you're being nice? And I think Todd's example there is perfect. So to get into it a little bit, we've had an episode already that by the time this comes out, it will have already dropped. It's called Attraction. We also have a little bit of this in our episode about obsession, romantic obsession. So does being nice make you undateable? The idea that the women fall for the jerk. And we've got a little bit of data on it. But first off, we will address the elephant in the room. Yes, being nice makes it look like you are trying to overcome a quote-unquote low number. So if you are nice in text or in your dating life and you're trying to overcome feeling inadequate against the person you are hitting on, the person you are trying to date, that is a little bit different than what we're talking about. That's not altruistic nice. That's nice because you are trying to raise the esteem of somebody else. Todd, on the other hand, Todd is our perfect example of truly nice, and people notice it and are attracted to you for that.
And then you'll notice that, too, we're talking about people who are fake and phony. Do they just treat you that way, or do they treat everybody like they're special? Right.
That's a good point. I'm gonna use a quote here actually to define this a little bit from Psychology Today. It's, if nice really meant weak and boring, then guys wouldn't be attractive. The classic definition of nice: emotionally sensitive, kind, and caring about others. It holds great appeal. So we're going with Nice, dateably nice, is that emotionally sensitive, caring, and appealing generally. So to talk about this point, I found a study, and I swear I'm not making this up. In fact, I encourage you to look it up. It was done in 2003 by Urbaniak and Kilman, and it's about Todd.
Not this Todd.
not this Todd. I choose to believe it is this Todd.
Maybe it is.
But they used fake online dating profiles, and they depicted versions of the same Todd. So it was they made a nice Todd, they made a neutral Todd, and they made a jerky Todd. And when I was reading this, I was like, well, this is clearly written for our podcast.
Yeah, exactly. What are the chances? Todd is not a common name. It never was. You didn't go to school with 5 Todds.
Right, yeah. Probably the only Todd in the room in most places. So these profiles were completely identical, except for subtle suggestions of qualities of niceness in some of them, indicating that they were reading about the nice Todd. And women selected the nice Todd as a person to date twice as often as they chose neutral Todd. So when they had a choice reading their online profiles, they went for nice, which kind of surprised everybody. And they chose nice more than 8 times more frequently than jerk Todd. Of these Todds, nice Todd, neutral Todd, jerk Todd, which one do you think was more attractive?
Well, if they all picked him, it must be nice Todd.
That's actually not how they picked. So for attractiveness, they found jerk Todd more attractive.
Yeah. He's better looking even though he's mean.
Yeah, even though he is the same profile, they found jerk Todd more attractive, but nice Todd more dateable. So a more refined look at the results. They saw nice Todd as better marriage material, which I think might be slightly validating for you, our re-engineered Todd.
Well, I'm bipolar anyways. I have multiple personalities. So I am nice Todd, neutral Todd, and jerky Todd all the time.
That's your secret. Okay, now I understand. The participants, they gravitated toward nice Todd to be more steady, to be better marriage material, and for a steady boyfriend. They also chose him as a platonic friend. Sorry, nice guys out there. Although he was not preferred for short-term relationships. So when we say that women chose the aggressive Todd, the jerk Todd, for attractiveness, they also picked him for short-term dating. So when people are out there are like, why are women attracted to jerks, and they kick a soup can at that point, it is actually a little bit true if you follow this study. Women are slightly more attracted to the jerks, but they don't pick him for long-term dating or marriage. So being nice does come with some assumptions. Again, from the same 2003 study. And also, we're going to mix this in. Well, first, the 2003 study from the what we mentioned. Being nice comes with the assumptions that you might be more intelligent but less assertive. Again, from the Urbaniak and Kilman study, but also from a study by Harold and Milhausen in 1999 in the same article. They suggested that women assume nice guys are less sexually experienced and are less physically attractive just by the profile presented, but they're looked at as more interested in commitment. So knowing nothing about a guy except that he's nice, women will assume that he is less attractive, less sexually experienced, and more interested in commitment, knowing nothing else.
Not fair.
It's not fair. So if we all were multifaceted like our very own Todd, we would hit all of the buttons, but instead we usually come off as one or the other.
You have like a jerk Joe and a nice Joe. The jerk Joe attracts them, and you hand it off to the...
Exactly, yeah.
And the nice Joe keeps them and marries them and lives happily ever after.
Right, we need the personality baton that we can hand off. Like, here you go. So I also want to, we talk a little bit on this show once in a while about how you can make a study say almost anything, or you can make statistics say almost anything. I just want to point out that there was a famous Chinese study about faces and whether people are more attracted to nice. So if you're big into sort of popular science, you might have even seen this come up in your feed. But we did not pull from it because most websites and peer reviews say that study was had potential cultural biases, so we did not pick up on that. Also, we did in our Linda Risson attraction episode, for the other side of this, do nice people look attractive to us? We talked about a study in that episode where women would smile or not smile at the end of a bar. And the scientists that did that study, they would basically look and see how long a man would stare back at them and how often a woman would collect a number. And they found that women who were smiling, which is a strong indicator of somebody who is going to be nice to you, they were 7 times more likely to be approached and given a number. So again, does niceness pay off? It looks like for men, it pays off in the long run, and for women, it pays off pretty much immediately if you appear nice in the moment. So that kind of explains how Mr. Rogers was married. So Todd, would you mind giving us another view into Mr. Rogers and how dang nice he was?
This is the problem, Joe. So Joe reached out to me, gathered a lot of research for this, and there are so many great stories about the things this guy did. We don't have time to read all of them or go through all of them.
Right.
And they're all special. They're all miracles. But this one I picked out. There was a boy who lived in Southern California, and he had severe cerebral palsy.
Okay.
To the point where he couldn't walk or talk. He did all his talking through typing. This boy was 14 years old, and when he was younger, he has always hated himself because of his condition. He's got this internal pain. He thinks that he is not good enough and shouldn't be alive. And Mr. Rogers was his hero, and his mom firmly believes that if his boy didn't watch Mr. Rogers when he was young, he probably still wouldn't be alive.
Wow.
His mental health would have decayed at that point, and even though he's 14, he's way past Mr. Rogers and his own maturity level. He still loves the show. The mother always wanted his son to meet his hero. They don't have any money. He's disabled. But she found out that there was a foundation that brings Mr. Rogers out to visit kids with disabilities. So she wrote a letter, and Mr. Rogers came.
Wow. So Mr. Rogers, he is his own personal Make-A-Wish Foundation, basically.
Absolutely. For kids who that's his hero. The problem is the boy really doesn't like himself. So when he found out Mr. Rogers was coming, he was happy at first, but then the stress of it, the anxiety, the buildup, he couldn't take it. And he was started to hit himself, and he hated himself even more. So Mr. Rogers comes out. The mom's horrified that this is happening. And he sits and talks to him, and he calms the boy down like only Mr. Rogers could do.
Right.
And Mr. Rogers goes, Joe, and asks the kid a favor. And the favor was this. He said, "Will you pray for me?" And the boy was absolutely floored. He said, no one in his life, Joe, he's got severe cerebral palsy, has ever asked him to pray for them. It's always the opposite. People always feeling sorry for them, always saying, how can we help you? And this was his man, his hero, the TV star, asking him. And it just swelled his self-esteem. He felt like if Mr. Rogers thinks I'm good enough to pray for him, then I am okay. So this miracle happened. They're driving away, and the reporter that was with Mr. Rogers said, wow, man, that was a good one. And Mr. Rogers looked shocked. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, well, how you helped that boy by telling him to pray for him. That really did him a big favor. And Mr. Rogers was floored. He goes, no, that's not why I did it. He goes, a boy with that kind of disability and that kind of pain, and God loves him that much, I think he's closer to God. I want him to put in a good word for me. And he said that with all honest and earnesty, because that's how he saw the boy. He didn't feel bad for him. He said, that kid's closer to God than I'll ever be.
That is beautiful. I almost don't want to taint that story, especially with him not showing pity on somebody who is used to being pitied. But as the cold, rational splash of water jerk that I am for the show,
Can't help yourself.
I can't help myself. So, do you think Mr. Rogers was ever doing it for the money?
No.
No?
Because he could have moved on to another network. I'm sure he had how many offers? He could have the cereals and all this stuff. No, I don't think so.
Yeah, to remind everybody, he was on public television, and that can't possibly pay as much as a network, right?
No tigers and drugs on PBS.
No, that's why we're not on PBS. Is we want those tigers eventually. So we're going to talk money for our third science discussion, or our not science, but practical discussion. Does being nice make you more money in the end? Because as much as I want to emulate Mr. Rogers to be a better person, I also really want to know, how does that affect your bank account? Quick question, Todd. For you personally, do you find that being nice has been beneficial to your wallet? Do you feel like you've been walked on enough to where it's cost you? Or do you feel like people generally do more for you because you're nice?
I try not to keep score, but I think I've given more than I've gotten back.
Okay.
What about you?
I kind of almost feel the same. Like, I assume that when I'm nicer, that people at work are not taking advantage of me, but that maybe I'm not getting as many opportunities because I'm too nice. And I like we started this with, I definitely kind of feel that way with Mr. Rogers. Like, I get a sense that, what if he had sold his show? Like, what if he had gone to like another channel? So for this, we want to address, like all episodes, the practicality of what we are preaching. We don't want you just to start being nice because science says that you'll be more dateable or that people will like you more. We want to actually look into the money aspects of it too. So this comes from, we're going to link off to this article so people can look at it, but originally came from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, and they analyzed 4 really big data sets. 2 of which included tracking individuals and their families over several years. So in a data set from a UK household study, they looked at how people responded with altruistic behavior. So when we say altruism, we mean people who are genuinely giving with time and money. Altruism costs both. And they looked at households. The altruism they measured was purely by how much they gave to charity, how much time they volunteered. So those are the 2 measures. The most
valuable thing that any of us have, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's exactly what you were talking about with Mr. Rogers, is he took time out to go visit with somebody who had palsy, who was in as much pain as they were. So just speaking of the aspects of niceness, altruism is the biggest, and it's the one we can basically quantify. We can count how altruistic you are. So for this, they showed that people who showed greater altruism in these studies, in this sort of study collection, they had a greater number of children throughout their lifetime. They had more income, and they had more personal interactions. But the bigger 2 of those, the ones that we're really focused on, were they had more children and they had greater income. Now,
so that's measurably more.
Measurably more, yeah. If you're just strictly talking about like life victories, or just the sum total of life's rewards, measurably more.
More of your tribe carry on the family name.
Exactly. Yes.
And more loot.
Yep, you got it. Yeah, a bigger war chest, more children. A similar study was done in America over a 14-year period, and those in the top bracket of altruism showed the same thing. Whereas, like the British study, it had the same kind of outcome. Americans who were altruistic had the most children, not just more, the most, and they had a higher income. Now, I will state, just to be very clear, income means money coming in. It does not mean wealth accumulated. So in our villainy episode, we talked about people who could successfully callous themselves mentally, acquired and held on to more money throughout their lifetime. When we talk about income, we mean the flow of cash coming into your house. It doesn't mean that you're banking it all and that you're building a pool of money. It means that you're bringing money in, and it's probably being spent on your kids. So
and spend on all the people you were nice to.
Right, exactly.
Keep the Ponzi scheme going.
the Ponzi scheme of life. It's having kids.
The Ponzi scheme of nice.
Yeah. But yes, altruistic people were seen as having more kids, having higher income. Now, to explain this, one of the studies actually went out of its way to mention that the possible reason they actually briefly looked into the idea that maybe altruistic people were more fertile. That does not seem to be the case. One of the scientists noted that selfish people may tend to have lower quality relationships, that they're too busy being distracted by themselves, and so they have fewer opportunities to have children.
Just more selfish.
Exactly.
They don't hand their time out. Yeah, I totally believe that.
If you're busy going to private clubs and zooming around in a Lamborghini, you may not be taking the bus with people who might be interested in you. You may not be sitting down and listening to, sitting across the table from somebody who is somebody that you normally wouldn't conversate with. So,
and I've seen that, Joe, when people who, when they're dating style, they have no interest in marriage and no interest in doing anything that they don't want to do until they meet that one person. Then they're carrying the lap dog around and talking about marriage.
Exactly.
It's like, what happened to my friend Dave?
Yeah, suddenly they're holding the purse in the mall or sitting on the chair waiting for someone to get changed. Yeah. So if you're talking money-wise, nice guys and nice gals, they do finish well. They finish with bigger income and more kids because they have simply more opportunities.
Well, I have to share with you how this episode affected both Joe and me emotionally. Now, Joe's a lot more callous than me in about everything. I'm more sensitive and emotional than he is, but hearing about how kind Mr. Roger was to children brought us both to tears. Total different stories. So I wanted to share that with you.
I will admit to getting a bit misty during a few of these.
I want to share another story with you. Mr. Rogers, there was this little boy, and he was at an autograph signing, and his mom took him, and he was a huge fan of Mr. Rogers. And he had this big sword, and he was waving it around. It was one of those big plastic, obnoxious ones.
Like He-Man or something.
Exactly. And Mr. Rogers is not a big fan of weapons. He's not a guy you show your gun collection to. And the mom was horrified. She's finally he gets his chance to meet his hero, Mr. Rogers. And like a lot of times, kids embarrass their parents when.
Of course.
He wasn't doing it on purpose. And Mr. Rogers looked at this boy and he kept waving kind of aggressively waving this sword around, right? And his mom was screaming for him to put it down, and he wouldn't. And he had a wild eye, He was kind of looking right past Mr. Rogers like he was in a different planet. And Mr. Rogers scooted up to him, got in his ear, and said something. And it just floored the boy. And the boy just, all of a sudden, his emotions changed, and he wasn't so aggressive, and he just relaxed, and he said his piece, and he walked away. And so the reporter asked him, they said, you must have said something to scold that boy or calm him down. What'd you say to him? And Mr. Rogers said, I can see how strong and tough you are with that sword on the outside, but I want you to know that you're just as tough as that on the inside.
That is beautiful.
Now, Mr. Rogers' legacy is, it's huge. He is probably one of the greatest parenting mentors of all time. He passed away at 74. He got stomach cancer, and he had all his family around him when he passed. His parenting style was simple. A lot of love, patience, and then even more love. All kinds of positive shows. People that came off of who grew up watching his show, and people who worked on his show with him. A lot of documentaries, musicals, all kinds of things have gone out there. And it took all the way to 2018 with Why Won't You Be My Neighbor? And this was a big hit documentary. Now, documentaries don't make as much money as regular movies, but this documentary about him grossed $22 million.
Wow. And that's just about the making of his show?
Yeah, just about, yeah. I don't know, it's part of his life story, too. It's the 12th largest grossing documentary ever produced.
That's awesome.
And then in 2019, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, it talks about his life, his life and his TV series. And the big-time actor, Tom Hanks, played that role.
Oh, of course he did. I can't think of... So the nicest actor on Earth plays the nicest kids show producer on Earth.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that's a good point.
That's awesome.
But to me, his real legacy is how he treated people and how he made people feel when the cameras were not rolling.
That's fantastic.
Today we wanted to explore the myth as a whole that nice guys, truly nice guys, finish last. And they do finish last, but only in a very narrow spectrum of dating, when they might appear weak, needy, or boring to a potential fling. But being nice, practicing social consciousness, and being cooperative has put our species as a whole on top of the world and in space. There's a reason chimps can't come together to build a rocket ship. They lack, well, the niceness for that kind of coordination. Nice Todd might be perceived as less aggressive, less sexually active, and less attractive. But nice Todd is seen as more intelligent and better marriage material. Even better than insensitive Todd, who comes off as more attractive, if you can believe that. Finally, in the financial world, being callous may help you retain wealth. Being cynical may keep you healthier longer. But if you value family, children, and income stream, then altruistic people definitely win big in the end. In a world that feels like it's trying to take advantage of us all the time, being nice, truly nice, might seem like a weakness. But trust me, and trust the science. Being nice is human nature, perhaps the best part of our nature. And if people laugh at you for being a doormat, just remember, the nicest man on earth made a theater full of chuckling people go silent just by holding up his wristwatch. You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us. We have a new episode every week.
You can connect with us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where you can find our research links, show notes, and blog articles for every episode. We also appreciate feedback, and we love spirited debates.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything. Now, I want to dedicate this episode to a friend of mine. I have a friend. Her name is Jamie. And she is one of the best yoga teachers in the country. And she's a world-class meditator. And we go hiking about every other month. And we were walking along. And she just has really got into Mr. Rogers. And she just went on and would tell me about him and just what kind of person he was. And I had seen these documentaries and these movies, but she had read a lot more. So that's why I put it on our docket. And Joe got into it. So We dedicate this to you, Jamie, Queen of the Ozone.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jamie. And if any of you guys have ideas for shows, just go to our website and send us in. We might actually pick it up and might inspire an episode. So thank you, everybody who's been giving us feedback.